A good evening to you all, and thank you for joining us here on Rwanda Television News tonight. We do hope you had yourselves a productive Tuesday. Now here's a sneak peek of our edition. President Paul Kagame noted that the large number of participants attending the Nuclear Energy Innovation Summit on Africa is clear evidence that the future of Africa's economy will depend on how the continent addresses challenges in the energy sector. Economy analysts say that strengthening relations between Rwanda and Tanzania will continue to benefit both countries, mainly because the port of Dar es Salaam handles 70% of goods imported into Rwanda as well as those transported to neighboring countries through Rwanda. We are glad to have your company tonight, coming to you straight from the heart of Africa, Kigali. My name is Martina Abera. Now, President Paul Kagame noted that the large number of participants attending the Nuclear Energy Innovation Summit on Africa is clear evidence that the future of Africa's economy will depend on how the continent addresses challenges in the energy sector. He reiterated this while officially opening the Nuclear Energy Innovation Summit on Africa taking place in Kigali. We have more coming from Adam Squizera.
Finding collective solutions to Africa's electricity shortage is one of the key issues being discussed at the summit. President of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu Hassan, noted that the use of nuclear energy requires strong cooperation among African countries.
Tanzania strongly believes that regional cooperation is essential for Africa's successful nuclear energy future. Thanks to President Kagame for championing the coordination of the nuclear agenda in Africa. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Through these partnerships with international organizations and peers, Tanzania looks forward to learning from global experiences and strengthening cooperation in nuclear energy transition.
President of Council of Togo, Following Yasimbe, noted that nearly half of Africans still lack access to electricity, yet the continent's desired development depends heavily on energy access.
Nos villes vont continuer de croître.
Our cities will continue to grow, our industrial needs will increase, our economies will become more digitalized. All of this requires energy that we can no longer realistically expect to obtain solely from the sources we rely on today.
Les seules sources que nous mobilisons aujourd'hui.
President Kagame emphasized that nuclear energy is not meant to replace renewable energy, but rather to complement it. He also highlighted the important role countries must play in supporting the sector.
If countries work in isolation, progress will be slow and far more costly. Cooperation on radiation, financing, and regional power integration is essential.
The head of state further stressed that for Africa, energy remains the foundation for industrial growth and technological advancements, especially as the use of artificial intelligence, which continues to expand and demand more reliable energy supply.
For Africa, energy is not simply a development issue. It is the foundation of industrial growth and competitiveness. Modern manufacturing, mineral processing, digital infrastructure, and advanced healthcare all depend on reliable power. The rapid expansion of artificial intelligence and the data-driven industries will also significantly increase energy consumption.
During the summit, Rwanda and Tanzania also signed a Memorandum of Understanding on Energy Cooperation, which reflects the shared commitment of both countries to deepen cooperation in strategic areas of the energy sector, including power infrastructure development, renewable energy, institutional capacity strengthening, and cross-border energy collaboration. Adams Kwizera, RwandaTV News. Kuri Afurika, ingufu ari ishingiro ry'iterambere ry'inganda.
Leaders of nuclear energy institutions say that Africa should find its own solutions to ensure a stable electricity supply capable of supporting major industries on the continent. They also believe that Africa should equip its youth with greater knowledge and make better use of its abundant natural resources. While opening the second Conference on Nuclear Energy, Lassina Zerbo, the chairman of the board of directors at the Rwanda Atomic Energy Board, stated that it is unreasonable for Africa to possess all the necessary resources while still lacking reliable electricity access.
Nearly half of Africans still lack reliable access to electricity, yet our continent possesses many of the strategic resources required for the global energy transition: uranium, cobalt, lithium, graphite, and rare earth. Africa's challenge is therefore not one of resources. It is a challenge of transformation. The question is no longer simply, how do we electrify Africa? The question is, how do we power Africa's industrialization, digital sovereignty, and long-term growth in a sustainable way? Fortunately, it was said just now, global financial institutions are beginning once again to consider civil nuclear energy within their financing portfolios. Africa must not be an operator of this new era, energy era. Like it is popularly said, if countries are not at the table, they risk being on the menu. Africa should not simply aspire to have a seat at the table. Africa must help shape the table itself. And that's what we're trying to do at NESA.
Dr. Lassina Zerbo also emphasized that Africa's development will not be possible unless greater efforts are made to strengthen education for young people, particularly in science-related fields, calling for special cooperation in this area as well.
The world's largest technologies companies, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta, are now investing massively in nuclear energy. Why? Because artificial intelligence and data center require enormous quantities of stable electricity. The digital giants have understood one essential truth: there will be no powerful artificial intelligence without reliable, dispatchable, and decarbonized energy. This is also a message for Africa. There will be no Africa without African energy sovereignty. But let us also be clear-eyed. Ambition are good intentions alone and will not be enough to materialize that future. Financing will remain a central challenge. The cost of a capital remains high. Projects remain fragmented, and many countries still lack the institutional ecosystem required to move from political ambition to bankable projects. Africa's nuclear future will depend on African talent, and that is key. Human capital is our first strategic infrastructure. Before reactors come engineers, before deployment comes training, and before sovereignty comes knowledge. That is why initiatives such as NESA Next Gen, Women in Nuclear, Youth in Nuclear, and university partnership are so important. And to the young African present in this room, let me say this: you're not simply the next generation. You're already the generation that will shape Africa's energy future. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, NESA will not ultimately be judged by speeches or panels. It will be judged by the partnership created, the project launched, the investment mobilized, and the concrete decision that emerged from Kigali. We have a long road ahead, but Africa is ready to embrace this challenge. Welcome to NESA 2026, and let us get to work. Thank you.
Issues related to knowledge and expertise were also highlighted by the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Mariano Grossi, who say that Africa should prioritize this sector because progress cannot be achieved while the number of highly trained specialists remains limited.
One very important thing is how we build capacity. You were saying just now that before sovereignty comes knowledge. Knowledge is key. And for us to be able, and for you to be able to host nuclear power plants, big or small, we need to capacitate, we need to train, we need to unleash the force of African talent, which is there, but needs to be reinforced. And this is why the IEA has been helping in all of these training, capacity building programs, education programs that are bringing this capacity here.
Mariano Grossi also reminded African countries that the injustice they previously faced through restrictions on investing in nuclear energy has now been removed, noting that such investments are now permitted and urging African nations to take full advantage of the opportunity.
When countries came to multilateral banks, development banks, finance institutions, in many cases, believe it or not, there was a prohibition. Nuclear was not to be financed. And so that was making this gap even bigger and wider and unfairer, if I can say it. But this has changed. And of course, as always, when the World Bank Group takes a direction, then the tone and the melody has changed. And very, very quickly, a number of other institutions, starting with the Asian Development Bank, we signed an agreement in Manila in December, the Latin American Development Bank, and now, of course, I can tell you that we are in a very advanced stage of conversations with the African Development Bank. So we can also bring the possibilities of financing to Africa. The Islamic Development Bank, we do have agreements with them. So all these possibilities are there. And what this does is the very important psychological and also economical barrier of de-risking achievable. So when we can have projects that are, the magic word, bankable, then things become possible. Then an SMR becomes something that is a real possibility.
Leaders from various sectors, together with heads of development banks across Africa, have discussed possible ways of financing projects aimed at building small nuclear energy plants in order to provide a long-term solution to the continent's persistent electricity shortages. During the discussions, participants noted that by 2050, Africa's population is expected to exceed 2.5 billion people, while cities, industries, and other infrastructure requiring electricity will continue to expand, increasing the demand for sufficient and reliable power. Kande Kumkela, who heads the organization PICREF, focused on environmental protection and renewable energy use in Sierra Leone, said African countries should prepare adequately because some nations are already far ahead.
We need to connect 80 million Africans every year to electricity, moving from an average of 20 to 23 million per year we're doing now. Again, quantum leap is needed. All of this in the next decade. This is why we embrace Mission 300, that has taken all of these issues into consideration, and over 30 African countries now have a Mission 300 compact. So my first message here is work is already ongoing on the planning we need to ensure that Africa is electrified, and in fact we're on a pathway to universal access to energy over the next 5 to 10 years. We have to take advantage of that if we want to move into nuclear. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Mission 300 has all the necessary pillars on policy reforms, energy trade, utility reforms, all packed in, and of course the resources required. So we have a base to start from.
Using the example of the Inga Dam, which had been expected to generate more than 50,000 megawatts of electricity, but has not yet achieved that target, Donald Kaberuka, head of the financial and investment advisory firm Southbridge Group, said that the most practical way for Africa to obtain the electricity required for development is through the construction of small nuclear plants.
All desire regional cooperation. It is an important aspiration. But who in this room has not heard about Inga being able to produce 50,000 megawatts of electricity? Many of us have tried to do that project. Before me, after me, when I was in the bank, all kind of formula have been tried. Now, it is not a technical problem that we can't put. Many of those rivers emanate from the highlands of Guinea. So it is location specific, including the Niger. Okay, if you look at hydro in Africa, many of the sources are in these Guinea highlands, in the Congo basin, Ethiopian highlands, I think the Zambezi basin, and then highlands of Lesotho. Okay, so it's location specific. So is solar, so is wind. But nuclear is not location specific. And so that is one of its main attractions.
Participants also stressed that financing nuclear energy projects is not something a single institution can manage alone, which is why cooperation is needed between the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and actors in the finance and investment sectors. Lucy Chenge, Executive Associate of Project and Infrastructure Finance at the Trade and Development Bank, emphasized this point.
One of the missing links in the system, really, we don't have long-term funding sufficient of it within the continent. And without that, there's no way to deliver on these long-term projects, because if you look at the sort of funding that would be needed to address the type of numbers that was spoken about in the previous discussion, you're going to need long-term funding. And we really don't have sufficient long-term funding enough for that to happen. So I think that's one of the other areas that has not been discussed yet.
The shortage of electricity across Africa continues to slow industrial development in many countries, largely because of frequent power outages. It was noted that by 2035, Africans will require 650 gigawatts of electricity, while the continent currently produces only 260 gigawatts. On the sidelines of the Nuclear Energy Innovation Summit for Africa, Rwanda and the United States of America signed a memorandum of understanding on strategic civil nuclear cooperation. The agreement was signed by Rwanda's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Usta Kayitesi, and Ms. Renee Sonderman, the acting Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Arms Control and Non-Proliferation at the U.S. Department of State. Moving ahead, economic analysts say that strengthening relations between Rwanda and Tanzania will continue to benefit both countries, mainly because the port of Dar es Salaam handles 70% of goods imported into Rwanda, as well as those transported to neighboring countries through Rwanda. In addition, investments on both sides have created employment opportunities for many citizens. Gladys kicks off.
The Central Corridor, which connects the port of Dar es Salaam to countries in the East African region, including Rwanda, is the route through which 70% of goods imported into Rwanda and exported to neighboring countries are transported. In 2025, the value of trade and investment between the two countries reached $263 million. Economic expert Kalisa John Bosco notes that Rwanda and Tanzania maintain strong trade cooperation from which both sides benefit.
Tanzania is a strategic trade and investment partner with Rwanda. Rwanda imports a substantial amount of goods from Tanzania, but also we use a central corridor as a gateway to our imports as well as exports. So there is a lot of products coming from Tanzania destined to Rwanda, and even re-exported to our neighboring countries like Congo, Burundi, and Uganda. And also Rwanda has a different set of products that are being exported to Tanzania, especially manufactured goods. You know, a number of companies are relocating to Rwanda, given our conducive business environment, and also in terms of leaping on the technology. Rwanda is ahead of the EAC partner states in terms of digital infrastructure. So there is a lot of interest, especially a number of firms establishing their business here in Rwanda, serving neighboring countries, including Tanzania. So our trade relationship, what we call trade flows between Rwanda and Tanzania, is growing at an impressive rate. As I mentioned, 70% of our imports comes from or uses the port of Dar es Salaam, but also what we export, more than 50% of Rwandan exports also transit through Tanzania. So in terms of business, Tanzania really serves as a strategic business partner with Rwanda.
In the tourism development sector, in 2026, the two countries took another step in strengthening business cooperation after Rwanda's national airline, RwandAir, launched flights to the island of Zanzibar.
We are happy today to launch Zanzibar destination. It's a very good destination that we wish to operate a long time ago. But today, it's a milestone to our company. And we are happy that even our clients, our customers, are very happy. So it's going to boost our network from in the region, East Africa, West, South, and even UK, as well as Europe. So today we are commencing a schedule that has 4 flights a week, which is going to be Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. So it's going to be a very good network, and we are happy to welcome all the passengers and our clients to Zanzibar and Mombasa.
From 1997 to March 2026, the Tanzania Investment Center recorded 42 investment projects from Rwanda worth $325.5 million, generating benefits including employment opportunities for about 2,225 Tanzanians. Tanzania's electricity company TANESCO and Rwanda's REG are also planning to cooperate in electricity trade between the two countries as part of economic development efforts. Economic expert Straton Habyarimana also believes that trade relations between Rwanda and Tanzania remain strong and promising.
There is a decision that was made by the Joint Commission last year to increase the volume of trade and via air transport, using, for example, Air Tanzania, but also making sure that RwandAir also makes daily flights to Tanzania as well. So there are a lot of initiatives that actually are aiming at increasing the trade volumes, but also the trade value of between both countries, and actually this helps to ease the way of doing business in Rwanda, because if we have such infrastructure, for example, it will ease the time we spend in linking Rwandan traders to Dar es Salaam port. That's one. But also making sure that the cost of transport goes down. Simply when infrastructure like railways are linking both countries, then it takes less time and less barriers to connect both countries.
The visit of the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu Hassan, to Rwanda comes shortly after President Paul Kagame's recent visit to Tanzania earlier this month, further demonstrating the political commitment to strengthening relations between the two countries. Enora Gladys, RwandaTV News.
Representatives of churches and religious denominations, together with law lecturers from various universities across Africa, have emphasized the need for cooperation between religious institutions and legal scholars in order to further strengthen the capacity of the youth of Rwanda and Africa in general. They made the remarks during a four-day conference bringing together researchers, representatives of churches and religious organizations, and law lecturers from different universities. The conference is being held under the theme Law, Religion and Youth in Africa. The leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Central Africa and a partner of the African Consortium for Law and Religion Studies, Thierry Mutombo, stated that African youth should not be discouraged by claims that Africa is poor, but instead should take advantage of the opportunities available to them.
African younger people don't need pity. People sometimes say, oh, Africa is poor. No, Africa is not poor. Africa is a land of great potential, and you can see it in the African younger people. They are not waiting for someone to do something for them, and they know it. They know that it's not easy, for governments to provide for their needs. And then we are seeing these younger people standing and then becoming creative in different ways. Look at them. They are doing something every single day to take care of themselves and take care of their families.
The representative of the team that organized the conference, Kofi Kwashiga, said the conference will play a major role in supporting African youth.
This conference is one of such means of bringing to the fore issues affecting the youth in Africa. So I must say this is one of the processes, and through this conference we hope that the papers presented and the ideas brought forth may become relevant in policy formulation by governments and other relevant agencies in matters relating to the youth in Africa. Though we look at it from the perspective of law and religion, but generally, of course, whatever decisions are taken here, whatever ideas are promoted here would feed into any policy that affects the youth.
The conference is expected to conclude with resolutions aimed at establishing cooperation between governments, higher learning institutions, and religious organizations in promoting African youth and finding sustainable solutions to their challenges. Last week, Rwanda hosted the Africa CEO Forum, and RBA spoke to a number of participants as part of our special coverage of the event. Here are two of those interviews.
The first generation, the structure was in his or her mind. When you get the second generation to go into business, the problematic is now that the second generation is not the first. So in this case, if you don't plan the transition between the two generations, there will be a distortion in the business and it might collapse. Now, when I talk about structure, the second generation can be very talented, but if they don't feel that the vision of the vision for the long term of the business and the values, if they don't embody them and agree with them, the business cannot succeed. So in this case, the structure, which is family governance, corporate governance, is the family going to stay in the management or the family is going to be more at the strategy level? That's all things you have to set up during the transition planning. If you do it well, the business will go from first to second and from second to third and go and so on. So that's why structure is very important. Talent is important, but structure is capital.
Yeah. Thank you. And we know how family businesses can pass down from one generation to another. We have seen this through the CEO of Jeune Afrique. And at Africa CEO Forum 2026, why is it important to spotlight family businesses as part of Africa's broader economic future?
I will tell you something. If you listen to the opening panel, one of the speakers, her name is Marianne Musanji. She's a family business leader, a second generation. And I would tell you, I received a few messages of friends of mine who were there, and they told me that was very interesting what she said. Why? Because, you know, the family businesses, they know what is happening on the ground. They are from Africa. If you're from Kenya, you know what's happening in Kenya. You need to know, because there is no way out. So that's why these businesses are very important, because they care about their local environment. Now you're telling me the CEO Forum, why it's a good platform for them? Because it's a good platform to connect, to do business. When you do business, technically, if you do it well, you can grow. And when they grow their impact. When they grow their impact, it means they impact more lives in Africa and give more jobs to our people. And what we need is to create jobs.
Yes.
So the African family businesses are going to be the one who will be creating the jobs.
Yes. And as a person who works closely with African family businesses, you know that generational transition can be a sensitive topic in many family-run companies. What are some of the biggest challenges African founders face when preparing to transition to the next generation?
I would say the first problem I see is they don't plan. There's a lack of preparation. So most of the time, they don't think of the succession, as it's something you have to plan, and it takes at least around 10 years for proper succession to go on. So most of the time, it's like, I have time. It's not yet the moment. And that's when it's not working. That's one thing. Second thing is, why they don't plan is because they don't want to talk about their death. But when you plan, it's not about your death. It's about the survival of your legacy. So if you frame it that way, you want to plan the transition, because transition is for what you built as a first generation to succeed for many years to come. And that's a different, way of seeing things. So I would say this is a lack of planning and the being scared of this, I won't be there. Yeah.
Yes, and Africa has one of the youngest populations of the youth in the world. How can young people become more involved in shaping and sustaining family businesses across the continent?
I would say the first thing is, if we train them right, the educational system gives them the right skill for the business sector will be very happy, private sector, to have young people to work for them. Now what we see is sometimes the educational system doesn't fit the business needs. And that's the problem we have. So I would say, if you can bridge the gap between the educational system and the needs of the private sector, that's where the African youth will be very, very empowered. And I use the word empowered because that's what we need to do for our youth, to empower them. Because if we don't empower the youth, the demographic dividend will be of no use for Africa. And if we empower them, we'll have a huge advantage at the global level.
Yes, and one thing that you also do is advise businesses on expanding into new markets. What opportunities do you see currently African families, businesses looking to in terms of growing beyond their home countries?
I would say it really depends.
Yeah.
I feel one of the biggest business I see is agribusiness. You have so many people to feed. The population is growing. So everything related to agribusiness, to FMCG, consumer goods, and industry, because FMCG it means manufactured goods. Manufactured goods and transform the agricultural products.
Yes.
So if you have this industry, good agribusiness, good FMCG with a manufacturing base, it will be a hit for Africa. It will be very good.
Yes, thank you. And lastly, what do you hope to be some of the main takeaways from Africa CEO Forum 2026?
I would say the main takeaway for me is to meet my business friends, to strengthen our contacts, our links, reinforce. I feel Africa CEO Forum is a good platform to reinforce your business relations. So I think that's the most important for me.
Yes.
Reinforce your business relations, keep good contact with people, like-minded people, and that's the best takeaway I will have for the forum.
Thank you very much, Hakim, and the work that you're doing with Africa Family Businesses.
Thank you so much.
I'm joined by Mrs. Sanda, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, CEO, but at the same time, Executive Director of the United Nations Global Compact, the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative working with businesses across the globe to advance sustainable and responsible business practices. We're glad to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, starting it off with the first question. We have been having conversation around scale and fail, but this year's theme, as I just said, the scale imperative, why Africa must embrace our shared ownership. So may you please elaborate, what does that mean to you as the UN Global Compact at the African CEO Forum?
As you said, the theme of the Africa CEO Forum around scaling, failing, and embracing shared ownership is so important at this moment in time for the African continent. We know that there's a lot of discussion around the opportunity for Africa to leverage the AFCFTA, to do business with the large and growing population, to produce quality outputs that are able to be sold on the continent, to make use of Africa's demographic dividend. We know the world is looking at Africa for its energy resources, its critical minerals, and its digital innovation. So scaling is about how do we make the most of the countries in the African continent? How do businesses grow beyond just doing simply business in one country, but perhaps regionally, even continentally? Scaling investment. A lot of discussion has been around the investment needed to move Africa forward. Some of the facts are that there's enough money on the continent as is. We just need to scale the way that it's channeled, put it into investing in energy and infrastructure. Shared ownership is about the countries of the African continent coming together and really pulling their resources, their innovation, their populations, their markets for Africa's economic growth.
We would also love to talk about some of the UN Global Compact country networks that you guys have been having in Africa, particularly in terms of like mobilizing companies in the SDG commitment to the most durable options that we do have an action, especially mostly in the African context, even the regional context in terms of like integration, but also at the same time African continental free trade. What is your take on that?
So the UN Global Compact at its heart is a membership organization. We operate through country networks. I'm excited that we're launching the network in Rwanda here actually later today. But you know, one of the things that we do in our businesses and mobilizing, as you said, towards corporate sustainability and the SDGs is getting businesses to understand that you don't have to decouple doing good business and profit. You can be a responsible business and you can be a profitable business. You can be a business that is contributing to the SDGs by, you know, greening your operations and your processes, by embracing gender equality, by making sure that you're paying living wages, by looking at how you're resilient and managing water and water resources. And so at the heart of it, we work with businesses to make them more competitive, more sustainable, more resilient, and more investor ready. On the African continent, we have 12 country networks, and really excited to be launching in Rwanda later today. And we have about 1,200 businesses that are members of the Global Compact here in Africa.
You just mentioned launching in Rwanda. What would be the message for the companies and entrepreneurs that are going to be joining the program?
So Global Compact will be launching its country network here in Rwanda later today. It's really an opportunity to bring the private sector around a set of ESG principles, as the business sector would call it, that, as I said, are going to make your business more competitive, more resilient, and really to contribute to Rwanda's Vision 2050. There's some very key things in there: competitiveness and integration, human capital development. We will work with businesses to do three things. We'll equip companies to act. They'll be able to be more sustainable businesses. We'll catalyze action. What can companies do together to improve gender equality or their environmental footprints? And we'll also continue to prove the business case that doing good business means that you can deliver on profit and purpose. We have 40 companies to start. We know it's going to grow into hundreds more. Exactly. And I'd encourage all businesses to join us. We're here for large companies and also here for SMEs.
And on that note, we've come to the end of the news bulletin. On behalf of the news production team, thank you for sticking with us on RTV News. Until next time, stay safe and have a good night.